Hello everybody, my name's Jacob Anderson. I'm an associate software engineer at Fortra and I have about 4 years on the platform. Today we're going to talk about how you can accelerate your career by becoming visible in the IBM community and turning that visibility into opportunity. So let's get started, shall we? Question is, why IBM? Well, from my experience, you've got a wonderful community to lean on, and everybody in the community is more than willing to help. They're extremely approachable, and there's not another community out there where you can get access to such big name players as in the IBM community. I've heard it said that you don't get to attend a Microsoft conference and meet Bill Gates, but you can go to an IBM conference and you can meet Scott Forsty, you can meet Steve Will, and you can meet any number of really important people in the community, and they're more than happy to provide support. So that's one of the core pillars of what makes the IBM community great. You're closer to the business. So when it comes to business rules, when it comes to the actual functioning of the business, you're going to get experience in that. You're going to be very close to the business, and the business is going to rely on you for their core processes. Not only is that super fun, but it also makes you really invaluable. It's very hard to replace somebody who has the technical knowledge and the business knowledge, and that's what you're going to get from working on this platform. So it's a great benefit to you and to the company. And finally, the ecosystem is accessible. There are ways to get involved with the community. There's known pathways, and there's understood methods to get in touch with people in the community who can help you on your way. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more in a minute. Let's go over what you're going to learn today. The main things I want to talk about is how to engage with the IBM community, maybe some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way that I feel are surefire winners no matter what environment you're in. How to use conferences strategically, in the sense that, attending sessions is great, but there are ways to maximize how effective your conference experience is. And we'll be talking about those today. How mentorship accelerates growth. Mentorship is a huge part of my success, and without it, I don't think I would be here speaking to you today. So we're going to go over how you can find a mentorship and what kind of benefits you get from it. We're also going to go over to how to approach interviews. So when it comes to the interview, there are things you can say and questions you can ask that are going to make people are going to know you're more aligned than other people just by virtue of the questions you ask. And we'll go over the specifics of that later. And then finally, how side projects strengthen your position. Just handing in a resume is great, but if you can demonstrate that you're interested in the platform in your own free time, you can really give yourself a big boost, in the sense that when I have a doctor who's going to operate on me, I've got to ask myself if I want to have the doctor operate on me that checks out when they clock out, or do I want the doctor that's looking up the newest and best techniques to do their job in their free time? And to me, I would prefer a doctor that is looking up the best techniques in his free time. And I think that applies to people in the IBM world, whether you're a system administrator or a programmer or anything in between. Showing that passion and dedication can set you apart from other people, and I think that's important. So moving on, let's talk about some myths and realities in the community. Here's a myth. The IBMI community is only for experienced professionals. And I made the mistake early in my career, attending my first conference, which I'll go over more later, of thinking, yeah, this is great. And I'm at the conference and there's people here. And maybe after a couple years of experience, I'll be able to go and talk to these people. But that is not a good idea. The sooner you get talking to people in the community, even very important people, I was worried that they would be too important to take time out of their day to talk to me. And I was sorely mistaken. That was absolutely not the case. The most important people in the community have been more than happy to interact and share some of their time with me, for which I'm extremely grateful. So that brings me to the point that newcomers are welcome. You don't have to worry about being new and not having a place here. We love bringing on new people into the community, and we love getting to interact with them and see them on their career journey. So please don't make the mistake that because you're new, you're not welcome, and that you are wasting somebody with a lot of experience's time. That's just not the case. It's not what I've found. The community doesn't really operate like that. Here's another myth. Networking is not that important. I spent the first almost 20 years of my working life understanding that jobs were something you applied for. You got a call back, you did the interview, and you either did or did not get the job. When I was told networking was an important piece of it, I was very skeptical. That's not how I had ever gotten a job. I've had a few jobs in my life, and it never really worked like that. But the difference is that this is a career. Everything else I was doing was more of a job. And so the reality of the situation is that networking is often the differentiator. If you know somebody who can vouch for you, who's established in the community, that could be your ticket in. Because the hardest part is getting your foot in the door. And to discount networking would be a huge mistake. So please do not discount the viability of networking, the benefits of networking. Conferences are just extra hoops. When I first started going to conferences, I was lucky enough to have my school provide those conferences for free to expose me to the community. And it was through a conference that I really landed my first big opportunity. But I hadn't had the best concept of what conferences were and why we had them. I felt I've got the skills, I've done the hard work, I've graduated college. Why should I have to go to a conference to have a chance at working in this field? But that was the wrong attitude. I should have looked at the conferences as an opportunity to make connections, to meet new people, to learn about the IBMI and the technology surrounding it. But instead, I had the wrong attitude, and I thought that I was having to do a lot of extra just to get a job that I was already qualified for. But you come to realize that because of the mission critical nature of the IBMI, you have to be a high trust person to be allowed in. And one of the ways that you can demonstrate that you're a high trust person is to make connections in the community with other high trust people. And that's how I eventually got my start. So please do not discount the opportunity that conferences bring. They're really great opportunities. and you can learn a lot, and you can meet a lot of new people. So don't have a bad perspective of conferences is the takeaway here. Realize that your perspective matters a lot. And I came to realize that on one hand, I felt like conferences were just extra hoops to jump through. But in reality, I had to ask myself, do I want to live in a world where there's nothing more I can do to improve my chances to get a job other than apply? Or would I rather live in a world where I can put in some extra effort somewhere and increase my chances? And for me, I'm okay with putting in effort to change the outcome, to put in the effort to get opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be there. And it changed my perspective. I stopped having a negative perspective of conferences, and I realized that they can be really huge in your career, and not just getting started, but making big career transitions. So we're going to have some talk about how to attend conferences intentionally and get the most out of them. So we're going to start with how to engage with the IBMI community. To me, I've experienced some things, and I think there are some things that are good suggestions no matter where you are in your journey. And they give you kind of an example to go from on how you can interact with people you're just meeting for the first time. So one of the common barriers is the cost of the conferences. And that can make people feel like they don't have a way in, especially if you're new. Typically your company pays, but what if you aren't involved yet? Well, you can volunteer to attend. You can volunteer and say, I would like to help out. Sometimes that can offset the cost. Sometimes you get to attend for free. And the reason I'm saying this is I was approached by somebody who ran a user group, and they asked me if I would like to volunteer to be a part of the user group. And I didn't really know that was an option. I didn't really know how you became a part of a user group. And it wasn't until somebody extended the offer to me that I realized that you could volunteer for a user group. So kind of as a public service thing, I'm letting you know that volunteering for a conference or volunteering to be part of a user group is an option. And many new people do not know this, but rather than make them magically come up with that question out of thin air, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, you can volunteer for conferences, you can volunteer for user groups. It's up to them if you get the thumbs up on that, but the point remains, go ahead and volunteer. See if you can't get into a conference through the back door, so to say. That's an option. So just letting you know that there's one possible option for a possible friction point that a lot of people encounter. Not knowing anybody. Yes, we all had our start somewhere, and we all don't know where to begin. So one thing you can do is you can ask questions. You can ask questions during the conference, during the Q&A portion of the presentation. And when you stand up and ask a question like that, it shows you're engaged. It shows that you value what the speaker is saying. And it actually shows that you can speak in public to some degree. And so even though you're only asking a question, you're kind of demonstrating a lot of things. And people are going to notice you. So ask questions during the Q&A portion of the presentation. If you are in the hallway and you see somebody, feel free to ask them where they work, what they do, and how they got their start on the platform. That's almost a surefire way to get a good conversation started, because almost everybody has a different story on how they got involved with the platform, and That's really the tie that binds here. We're all working on the IBMI, so it's almost a surefire positive question to ask somebody. And you'll find oftentimes that they ask you how you got your start on the platform. And this is how you start making connections. So, just a small example, but really powerful. Feel free to ask people how they got their start on the platform. It's pretty simple. Feeling inexperienced. Yes. So, if you say, sure, I'll attend a user group, and you show up once and you don't really understand what it was about and you never show up again, you've kind of missed the value. I mean, the learning is a part of it, but also getting to meet people, getting to connect with people, getting to see what the community is really about. And for me, I think it was beneficial for me to find out who the big players are. You know, Jim Buck, Simon Hutchinson, Marina, you know, Mike Pavlak. There's so many names. Figure out what kind of world you're entering. You know, that can help you tremendously to get oriented. Know the big name people, know what they do, and that's going to help you in the long run. It's going to help you root yourself in the community. It's going to help you get oriented. And so I cannot stress that enough. Show up more than once. You don't really know what world you're entering until you've been to these a few times, and you'll start to pick up things that you might not have noticed on your first pass. All right, so how to use conferences strategically. And I made a lot of mistakes in my first conference, and I'm hoping I can share those mistakes with you, and hopefully you can avoid making the same mistakes I did and learn some cool tips and tricks on how to get the most out of your conference experience. So here's the story. I was given free admission to a 3-day conference, and I attended the conference with one thing in mind. And the thing I had in mind was to walk out of there with a job. I intentionally did not want to talk to other people. Like I said, I felt maybe after a couple years, I'll have enough experience to actually talk to these people. But until then, I need a job. I get the job. I do that for a couple years. I go to a conference. Now I'm ready to talk to people. That was the attitude. It was the wrong attitude, but we're going to move forward with the story. So, printed off resumes, dressed up really nice, tried to hand out resumes, tried to find people who were needing to hire people, and ignoring everything else about the conference. Obviously, I attended the sessions, but in the back of my mind the whole time, I said, what I'm really here for is a job. And I left after 3 days, investing 3 days of my time with no connections, no job, and feeling completely hopeless, and not even really understanding what I had done wrong. So the opportunity came about that I had another chance to attend a conference. And once again, this was paid for by my school. And they said, you have a deadline to let us know that you would like to attend. And my teacher reached out and asked me, Jacob, would you like to attend? And I said, I don't think I can attend. I don't think I can handle the devastation of walking away without a job again. The concept and the prospect of getting a job seemed completely hopeless. I still didn't quite understand what went wrong with the first conference. It was a great conference, but I went in with the wrong mindset. And if I had been oriented differently, I probably would have gotten a lot more out of the conference. But, it really bothered me. I had to ask myself, why do I feel like it did not go as well as it could have? And I ended up talking with ChatGPT, hashing it out. And, the question came up, what were your goals in attending the conference? And I said to get a job. And it informed me that it's possible to get a job by going to a conference, but it's not really a good goal because there's a low chance of success. And if you set that as your metric for success, there's a very good chance you're going to walk away from the conference feeling like a failure because you failed. If you don't get a job, the conference was a failure. And so I said, well, what are some reasons that people attend conferences then? Because I didn't really quite understand. And it gave me a list of reasons to learn, to network, and those all sounded fine and dandy, but they didn't really resonate with me. So I pushed more and I said, what are some other reasons? And it said, another reason is to make a good impression. And that is the one that resonated with me. And I said, okay, to make a good impression, I think I can go do that. That seems like an achievable goal. It seems like a goal that's in the right direction. And it's not as black and white as walking away with a job. So I changed the metric for success. But the problem was that I missed the deadline to attend the conference. And so I asked my teacher, would I be able to attend the conference even though I was late? And initially, it wasn't going to happen. But because something had happened in the community, a person who had paid for the conference had tragically passed away, I was able to go in his place. And so it was a lot of things had to go exactly right for me to even attend this conference. And I was very fortunate that I was given this opportunity. And it's a lot of the reason why I'm doing this presentation today, because the community has given a lot to me, and I need to do my due diligence to make sure that I'm paying that forward. And so our teacher drove us to the conference. We're there the night before, waiting in the lobby, waiting to check in. And I hear a door open, and I look over, and who do I see but all these people that I had been reading about. I had realized that in my first conference, I knew the biographies for the speakers existed, but I didn't really look too much into them. So I changed my strategy this conference. I said, I'm going to look into these speakers. I'm going to figure out who they are, what they work on. And I even printed off a picture and a biography for each of the speakers. And I put that in a folio. So then I would have the confidence to recognize someone that I'd read about, open up my folio, brief myself, and refresh my memory on who they were. And I could go up to them and start a conversation with them. Obviously, we all know Jim Buck. He wrote the book on RPG programming, control language programming. And, so he's somebody you can talk to about RPG and being an author. Simon Hutchinson, SQL and RPG, he's got his wonderful website, rpgpgm.com. And so all these people had come walking in that I'd only studied. And I looked over and I saw Simon and I said, "You're Simon Hutchinson, rpgpgm.com. I was stunned. I was shocked. Nobody said anything about all these people being here the night before. And so we started a conversation and we ended up chatting the whole night. And it was really great. He shared all his knowledge with me. He shared life experiences with me. And he was just a great person to talk to and a great introduction to what the community is really like. And so I attended the conference the next day, and he walked across the room filled with all these IBMi professionals, and he walked up to me and he shook my hand and he said that he wanted to stay in contact. And it was one of the most moving and important moments of my whole life. I couldn't believe that somebody as respected and as important as him would walk across the whole conference in front of everybody to shake my hand, and it really meant a lot to me. And I didn't know it at the time, but that moment was going to change my life. So I adjusted the approach, and I made a lot better of the second conference. Well, a couple months later, I got an opportunity to interview for an RPG web position at a company. And the interview was going pretty well. And I realized how important it was to demonstrate that I was interested in learning more. Previously, I had interviewed at a company and they offered to train me, and I almost took it as an insult. I was thinking, well, I just got done with school. What do you think you're going to show me? Total mistake on my part. If a company says they're going to train you, that is a good thing. Even if you were to know everything, which nobody does, companies have proprietary ways of doing things, and they're basically saying, we're going to show you, we're going to onboard you, we're going to invest in you. So please don't make that mistake. So I realized that it was important to let them know that I needed to learn more. So I mentioned I am being mentored by somebody. And I didn't want to name drop because I felt like, you know, Simon is a very well respected person in the community. And so I didn't want to just name drop him like that. But they asked, they said, well, who's your mentor? And I said, Simon Hutchinson. I met him. And they said, wait, you know Simon Hutchinson? And I said, yeah. And the two interviewers looked at each other and kind of gave this like we gotta hire this guy kind of look to each other. And it was in that moment I knew that I was probably going to get the job. The rest of the interview went super well, and it all came full circle that making a good impression, attending the conference, and networking all fused and landed in me getting my first big break in the IBM world. All things that I had seriously doubted, all things that I, maybe had a bad perspective on. And so I feel like it's really important to share this story with people, and hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and not make them yourself, and just to illustrate the importance of conferences, of networking, of being part of the community. So setting the right conference goals, learning new skills is huge. I was told by somebody well respected in the community, if your company sends you to one of these things, a nice thing to do is to write up a little synopsis of what you learned there. That way they can understand the value of what you're getting out of it. And I think that's a great suggestion, and I found it to be a good idea. My boss was very happy after paying for this that I was able to come back and provide, some proof that I got value out of it. So learning new skills is huge. Meet people in the community. We've kind of been over that, how important that is. You might have your doubts, you might have your reservations, but meeting people in the community opens doors, and it gives you people who are going to support you in your journey. If it's strictly technical, or even if it's career-wise. For instance, Simon, my mentor, has helped me with both. He's helped me with the technical side. He's also helped me navigate my career. And there's no way I would be as effective as what I am if I had not met Simon. So meeting people in the community is huge. Understanding the ecosystem. I don't think it's a bad idea to know the big companies, to know the Fortras, the Profound Logics, to know the people involved there, to get an idea of who's who. It's going to help you navigate, and it's going to help you understand what the whole ecosystem is like. There's people who vend power servers. That's their role in the IBMI community. Then you have RPG developers, Then you have speakers. Then you have people who are working on the IBMI operating system itself. It's a huge ecosystem, and the more you can learn about it, the better, because it's so big and it's so massive that no one person can know everything. But if you know what exists out there, it's going to really help you in the long run. Get inspired and motivated, I mean, when you see someone who's really energized and they energize a room, it can really change you. And, I've seen a lot of great speakers where, maybe people are walking in and it's early in the morning and they just had their first cup of coffee and they're still waking up. But I've seen speakers give presentations where you could tell people were energized, people were excited and hopeful about the future. And it's pretty incredible to see somebody who can give a speech like that, So getting inspired and motivated is a big part of it. And I can personally say that I've been inspired and motivated by many speakers in this community. So prepare for conferences with confidence. We all know about reviewing the session list ahead of time. I feel like that's pretty standard. And if you don't, that's okay. But it's always a good idea to know what you're going to attend and what you plan to get out of it. And this might be controversial, but I was having a chat with AI again, and I asked, how do you get, what are some suggestions on how to get the most out of your conference? And it said something really interesting that I did not think of. And it said to tactically skip attending a session if it would be better for you to network instead. So, for instance, if it's something that's not entirely relevant to what your role is, it really might be better to go try to make connections with other people. Maybe the vendors, maybe other people who are missing a session, and just plan intentionally. Make sure you're getting the most out of the conference, because the presentations are a huge part, but also the people you meet and the connections you make are a huge part too. So don't discount the idea of those hallway conversations, because they can be very important. Read the speaker biographies we went over a little bit before. The going in and not knowing who is who, not knowing what people do or how to interact with them is going to be a huge barrier. But they've gone through all the trouble of including these speaker bios. And so if there's 10 speakers, there's at least 10 people that you don't have to start a conversation with knowing nothing about them. If you see Simon, ask him about SQL, ask him about RPG, ask him about running running a website. I did. I think those are great suggestions. So make sure you read the speaker bios, make sure you know the who's we talked a little bit about before. Decide which sessions matter to you. We went over that a little bit. If there's a situation where you say, I don't really think I can get any value out of the current presentations, maybe you've been to each one that's available multiple times, maybe it is time to go out in the hallway, go out to the vendors and have a chat, start meeting new people, start asking to add them on LinkedIn. That's going to be huge for you. LinkedIn is a really great social networking site. It's my personal favorite social networking site. It's for professionals. It's not filled with as much, opinionated off-topic stuff. It's business oriented. And so it's a social network for business people. And so I can't say enough good things about LinkedIn. Prepare a few questions. Now, this might just be me, but I feel so engaged when listening to a presenter that I have a hard time formulating questions. I'm thinking too much about what they're saying and listening too much. So by the time they get done speaking, and they ask if there are any questions, I'm still digesting what they've said and my head's in a different space. But if you know what session you're attending and you do have questions, prepare them beforehand, as long as they're on topic. And this will position you, like I said, as somebody who can speak publicly, as somebody who's interested, as somebody who's engaged, and somebody that people are going to take note of. So questions have dual usage. They get you the answer you're looking for, but also you're telling people something when you ask them a question. You're telling them that you're interested. You're telling them that you're curious. And you're telling them that you're willing to stand up and admit that there's something you don't know. And those are all really, really good qualities. The ambition to learn is huge. So we've kind of gone over this already. Make sure that you're talking to attendees and speakers. Don't do what I did. Don't go and only look for a job and, treat it like it's just a glorified job fair. This is a place to connect with people, to get oriented. And sometimes that's what's required before the job comes. The job is the end goal, but there's a journey before that. And this journey, part of that journey, is talking to attendees and speakers. Once again, ask questions during sessions. Not only does, like I said, it position you as somebody who's curious, but also it shows you're paying attention. I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but it's really true. Visit the vendor booths. This is going to help you get oriented to the world that you're in. When you see the big names and you're talking to the people involved with these companies, you're finding out what they do. You're finding out what their new initiatives are. You can determine if they've got an opportunity that fits for you. These are all good things, and it comes from visiting the vendor booths. And they have spent their money and taken the time to sponsor this and to show up. And so these people are often always very, very nice and very approachable. Some of them, the best information you can get is from talking to people at these vendor booths. And following up after the event, you're not just there to say hi and, say see you later, see you next year at the same conference. Ask if you can connect with these people on LinkedIn, or deliberately add them on LinkedIn during the course of the conversation. Make sure that the connection extends beyond just the conference itself. Make sure you're making long-lasting connections, and once again, LinkedIn is a great place to do that. How mentorship accelerates growth. I didn't even really know mentors in the business world existed. I thought mentors were people that helped you with your schoolwork. But there's mentors in a lot of different areas of life. And, you can be somebody who wants to find stuff out the hard way, or you can lean on decades of knowledge from somebody who's seen it before, and they can stop you before you step into a trap or do something you shouldn't be doing. It's always good to have a mentor that you can run ideas by, because sometimes they'll tell you that it's a good idea, sometimes they'll tell you it's a bad idea, sometimes they'll take your idea and take it to the next level. And that's what I've found the mentors in my life have done. They've taken maybe an okay idea, and they pointed in a direction that made it an extremely good idea. So I didn't know until that moment in my interview. Being mentored by somebody respected carries weight. I was just trying to show that I was willing to learn and still learning, because I had that wrong perspective before, that being told I would get training was a bad thing. No, you want a continuous learner. Companies want a continuous learner. This is a great way to say, I'm going to be a continuous learner, and I've got the best of the best that are teaching me. So being mentored by somebody respected does carry weight. You might not know what you don't know. And that's where a mentor can help out. They'll definitely inform you on things you might not be aware of. For instance, I've had mentors point me towards hackathons, scholarships, conference opportunities, you name it. And I would have never had those opportunities, let alone known they existed, if I didn't have some really great mentors in my life. Accelerates learning. Yes, you can do it the hard way. You can dig for information. You can be completely lost, and you can rely on Google to hopefully spit out an answer that you're looking for. But if you have a mentor, the pathway to getting the information and understanding is often much quicker. So definitely lean on your mentor for learning. Ask where they think you could improve. Ask what they think you should learn next. Those are all great questions. Provides career perspective. As a newcomer, I didn't really have a great perspective on what the landscape was like, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I just knew I wanted to program. But with some experience and with some help from my mentor, I now know that I would like to be a programmer analyst. That is the role that I think fits me the best and where I would enjoy myself the most. But without a mentor, maybe I'd still be figuring it out. Maybe I'd still just think all I wanted to be was a programmer, in some IBM peripheral technology. They can tell you where you need to grow. Mentors can. And this is often very, very hard to find out yourself. We all have blind spots, and a mentor is going to help you identify and fix those blind spots. So I can't advocate for getting a mentor enough. And you might be asking, well, how do I do that? There's a common mentorship program. There's going to be a link included in the slide that's going to take you right to the page where you can volunteer to be a mentor, or you can ask to be mentored by somebody. So please use that resource. It's a really great resource, and it can honestly change your life. So when finding a mentor, common is one way to do it. If you know that what lane you want to be in, there's probably a professional who's in that lane, and you might want to actively seek them out and communicate to them that you're interested in having them mentor you. Now, a lot of these people are very important, very busy people. They might not have time, but more often than not, you will find people in the community are willing to help. So make sure that you approach them respectfully. Make sure you've done your research. It doesn't hurt to, let them know that you've learned about them. I read your article on, the new release of the IBM operating system. I really loved what you said in that article. These people are creating content. These people are working very hard and oftentimes doing things in their own personal time. And the least you can do if you're asking for help is to orient yourself and do your due diligence to understand who they are. And through that, they'll understand why they're a good mentor for you. Yes, it can be tempting to maybe just ask them to give you a job or just hand you something, but it's not really the best approach. What you want is to show that you're open to learning, that you're open to suggestions, and that you're easy to work with. So you don't want to just ask for free stuff. What you want is to use their expertise to turn yourself into something better than what you could be without them. Be prepared and curious is a thing that's not just with mentors. You're going to want to be that in your role, and you're going to want to be that in your professional life as well. It's always going to benefit you to be prepared and curious. You know, these people have a lot of insight, and if you don't have any questions, you know, you're going to put a lot on them to direct and push the conversation, but through asking questions, they'll get a perspective on where you're at. You know, they can't read your mind, so if you can ask questions, they'll get an idea of who they're working with. You know, if you ask like, hey, I'm having trouble doing embedded SQL and RPG, you know, they're going to understand that you're an RPG developer, that you're interested in doing embedded SQL, so possibly leaning into more modern RPG development, and all sorts of other things just from the question that you ask. So be prepared and curious is a great advice, not just for mentors, but across the board. And make sure you follow through. You know, if they send you a message, don't leave them on read. You know, make sure that you're communicating and being vigilant in making sure that you're responding. You know, if you wait too long, stuff can feel like it's falling through. Messages get lost, people get busy. So it's kind of incumbent on you as the learner to make sure that you're following through and that you're not letting that communication slide. All right, how to approach interviews. So I've learned some really cool things over the years on how to approach interviews. And some of it I've kind of had to figure out myself. But from what I can tell, some of these suggestions, well, all of these suggestions, I think are really great. So you never want to get to an interview and not know anything about the company. Typically, it's pretty easy to find information on a company. I've had it happen before where I did have to resort to Wikipedia because there was so little about the company. I couldn't guarantee the accuracy of the information, but, you know, they can correct you, and I think they're going to be pretty forgiving if you did your research and there's almost no information about them. If you came with something, even if it's, you know, technically wrong, but you showed that you went through the trouble of trying to find it, and you can point them. In my case, I had to use Wikipedia for an interview. There was so little on the company. You know, but it shows that you made an effort, you know, and, you know, it's better than saying something vague like, oh, don't you guys sell groceries? Have something more concrete than that. And most of the time, companies have an About Us page that lists all sorts of facts about the company and its history. Pick the ones that sound interesting to you, and that's going to help you memorize them. And I always try to go in with 3 facts about the company that I have memorized, and the more interesting they are to me, the easier they're going to be able to recite in the interview. So just a small tip there. Understand the technologies they use. So for instance, yeah, it's an RPG role. You're free to investigate the company as you see fit. You know, maybe it's RPG, but maybe they have a web portal through which customers can make purchases. If you're in the interview and you say, hey, I know I'm going to be doing RPG, is that going to interact with your web portal through which you sell your products? Or the answer might not be yes, but they might go, gosh, this guy's already orienting himself towards our business. He's understanding our business processes, and he's, you know, obviously interested. This is a really great thing. Know what the role is asking of you. You know, you want to be oriented to the task. You want to know what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And you're going to want to insert yourself into that role through questions. And we'll go over that here in a minute. Be ready to explain how you learn. So, for instance, for me, I learn by doing. If I have a set of facts, I don't make the connections between them until I put them all together myself by building, by doing. I've got to get my hands dirty. Not everybody works that way. Some people want to be thrown into an environment and figure it out themselves. I like structured learning. I like structured learning and then building, and then from there, understanding follows. But everybody's different, but be sure to let them know this is how I learn, this is how I'm going to be most effective. Smart questions that, once again, you are telling these people something, but you're asking a question. So this was a great one. When I graduated, I didn't really understand that there were ticketing processes that were used to handle bug fixes and enhancements. I didn't realize that was part of programming. I was very syntax oriented. And so even though I had no experience, asking about their ticketing system showed that I was maybe more oriented than somebody else at my skill level. He already knows there's a ticketing process and he's asking how that all works. That is not something a typical person just out of school might ask. So even though it's a question, you're saying I'm a little bit more oriented than maybe my peers in this group. How are bugs and enhancements handled? It's the same kind of thing. I was very focused on syntax in school. I encountered my own bugs. We didn't do too much enhancing. It was mostly standalone programs. There wasn't add this feature to a program you already wrote too much of the time. So once again, this shows that you're absolutely more oriented than maybe somebody else who's in the same position that you are. And even if you're a veteran, these are not bad questions to ask at all. Shows you're interested. This one's great. What does success look like for me in this role? In my 8 months of not having a job, after my second conference, I did a lot of reading, and one of the books said to, when you're asking questions, insert yourself into the question. So you're making the interviewer already envision you in the role. So what you could ask is, what does success look like in this role? And that's one way to ask it. But if you say, what does success look like for me in this role? It almost sounds like you've already started to assume the responsibilities of the role. And it's going to make the interviewer envision you in the role. Or if you say, how much fixed versus free format am I going to be doing? Like you've already got the job. It's a confident thing. It's a signal thing. And when you ask it correctly, they probably don't even notice. But subconsciously, they're saying this person is ready. Closing the interview. Really great suggestions here. Now, nobody ever told me to say this. It's just something that I've picked up. But I've asked, and it seems to be like this would be a good question, and I've had success with it. Is there a senior developer that I'm going to get to learn from if you're a newcomer? That is because that's probably the plan anyway. The plan is probably to have somebody show you the ropes. But if you frame that as something that you're interested in having, and it was something they were already planning on doing, it shows that you're completely aligned, and it's going to make them feel like it's going to be an easy onboarding process and that you're already on board with what they've got planned. That's just my personal experience. So clarify expectations. you know, when I'm closing the interview, well, so I worked for a temp agency, and they said if you're going to this interview, you are required to ask this question at the very end of the interview. And the question was something like, is there anything about my skills or background that make you think that I'm not qualified for this job? And I couldn't believe it, because I was like, wow, I mean, you, now that I have this tool in my tool belt, you don't need to require me. I was happy to ask it. And the reason for that is because maybe something got miscommunicated in the interview and you don't really know. And so if you say, is there anything about my skills or background that makes you think I'm not qualified for this job? They might say, well, we're looking for somebody with SQL, but it doesn't sound like you have any SQL experience. You can say, wait, hold on, I have SQL experience. I must not have put that on the resume, or I didn't realize that was part of the requirements for this job, but I gladly can say I do have those skills. It gives you time to clarify yourself. And if they say no, we don't think there's anything about your background or skills that makes you not qualified for this position, you're basically making the interviewer admit that you are qualified for this position. And they're not just admitting it to you, they're having to admit it to themselves. And so that's a really great closer, I think, for the end of the interview. I think it's a strong closer, and really great that I got the experience to kind of learn that closer. Express interest in growth, absolutely. Like I said previously, I was going, train me. Why would you need to train me? I've had the schooling, I've passed the classes, I've got the degree. You're always going to need to grow, and especially in the IBMI world, it's too big for anybody to know everything. And so if you have somebody who's a naturally a curious person, wants to grow, wants to learn, that is going to signal huge to the company, because the idea is you're saying, I am somebody who is going to continuously grow, to take on more responsibility, and to carry this company forward. You're saying all of that just by expressing your interest in growing. And finally, ask about next steps. So with these companies, sometimes they've got to work your role into the budget. Sometimes, things move fast. Sometimes things move very, very slow. And so asking at the end, when should I hear back from you? And they say 2 weeks. You're going to save yourself 2 weeks of worrying about that every day. You're going to basically say, I'm not going to start worrying about whether I actually got this job until the time frame they gave me. If they get back to you earlier, that's great. If they get back to you later, that's okay too. But just save yourself some of the mental, the mental anguish, and ask about next steps. And sometimes that question can give you your answer already. If you ask about when can I hear back, and they say we'll be in touch, maybe that's a super not concrete answer, and maybe you can kind of infer that they're possibly not going with you, or something like that. It's not a set in stone thing if they just say we'll be in touch, but you can gauge the idea is that you can gauge how well you did and what your prospects are by asking about next steps. So your conduct in the IBMI community, how do you talk to people? How do you interact? There's some pretty standard things you can do that are going to keep you safe and make sure that you're making a good impression in the community. Be curious, ask questions. Obviously, we've kind of been over that quite a bit, but it remains true. Be a continuous learner. That's what companies want. That's what mentors want to see out of their mentees. It's what companies want out of their employees. Be curious. Ask others how they got their start. Slam dunk. To me, anybody at that conference, you can ask how they got their start in the industry, what they do, and it's always an okay question to ask. You're not asking how many years of experience they have. Maybe they're new and they're self-conscious about it. You ask them how they got their start, and you're going to hear their story. And everybody's got a really interesting story to tell. And typically, you're going to get asked back, "What's your story?" And you're going to have a really great story to share with them. So basically, just a great example, a freebie example that this is always a good question to ask. If you don't know how else to start a conversation, ask somebody how they got their start. If you're talking to a professional and they've got more experience than you, chances are the information they have for you is probably a lot more important than the information you have for them. And so when you get the opportunity to interact with one of these professionals, make sure that you're getting as much information as you can out of them. Ask questions, but definitely try your best to listen more than you talk, and you're going to get a lot more out of it than the other way around. And then finally, thank people for their time. This shows that you value that they've taken time out of their day to talk to you. It shows you're polite. I think politeness is the foundation for any any good communication in a relationship. So thank these people for their time. They're working hard in their job, and then they're taking their free time to be here, and they are generously donating that to you. So the least you can do is say thank you, be polite, realize that these people are offering you a great service, for really no cost to you. So I talked a little bit about LinkedIn before. I was initially using LinkedIn. I doubted networking at first. Then I got LinkedIn and I saw somebody who I knew in the community get the Al Barca Award. And that's when I realized that, and it was posted on LinkedIn, I realized that the community was not impenetrable. And I realized, because this person really deserved the award, I realized that the community was very good at recognizing the people who were making really great contributions. And so that changed my mind on things. I was very doubtful of networking. And I said, you know what? I'm hitting like on this. I'm pretty happy about this. And you know what? I'm going to say congratulations because this person really did earn it. This person is an incredible person in the community and somebody I look up to quite a bit. So then I started saying, well, you know what? I mean, just because I don't know these other people who are getting these awards, I'm sure they're a lot like this person I respect a lot. So when I see somebody in the IBM sphere, I'm giving them the thumbs up and I'm going to tell them congratulations because, basically almost to kind of rectify my bad outlook before. I was like, you know what? These people are working really hard. Let's give them a thumbs up. Let's give them a little recognition, If they're putting in a lot of hard work, the least I can do is participate, acknowledge it, and you know what? I mean, it helps the algorithm. Let's be honest. It pumps the algorithm when you comment and you like, and that's going to expose more people to it who are then going to also interact with it. And why shouldn't it be that way? Why shouldn't these people who are doing great things get some kind of recognition? So yeah, I think you can use LinkedIn tactically. And so what ended up happening was me just trying to do what I thought was right. After a couple of years of doing this, I realized that, when people look at my LinkedIn, they're going to go, gosh, this guy eats, sleeps, and breathes the IBMI. He's, really positive and he's very excited for other people's accomplishments, which I legitimately am. I really was doing it out of real, true happiness for these people, but it has really positive effects career wise, which is not the reason I did it. But I have gotten opportunities because of my presence on LinkedIn, even though that was not the end goal. So you can use LinkedIn and GitHub for that matter to build your online persona. So, one thing I like to do on LinkedIn, I do have opinions of my own, but I would like to be more established and more confident before I go offering my opinions on, say, the best way to write RPG or something like that. There's more experienced people than me, and I would like to hear their takes first. I'm still learning a lot myself. So what I do is I'll run polls or I'll ask questions of the community. And, instead of positioning myself as somebody who has all the answers, I kind of put a question out there and I find the people or the people who have the answers come to me. And the conversation and the insights are probably a lot better than if I'm just willy nilly throwing my opinion out there. So I think asking thoughtful questions on LinkedIn is really great, or running polls are really great things. Congratulate others on accomplishments, pump the algorithm, give them the recognition they deserve. You know what I mean? Celebrate these people, because there's going to come a day where you do something great and you're going to want people to celebrate you. So start building your community now so there's people there to cheer you on when you do achieve something great. Share community wins. That's pretty obvious. Yeah, like, comment. These people are working hard. The least we can take a second out of our day, give them a thumbs up, tell them congratulations, repost so the whole world knows, tell the algorithm this is important, share this with other people. Avoid negativity. Some people, maybe if you're established enough, you can get away with it, but it's not something I would suggest. It's a fine line to walk, and to me, why do something that will get you attention that could cause people to respect you less when you could be doing things that will only make people respect you more, like sharing community wins, being happy for other people. There's no real case for that to rub somebody the wrong way. So avoid negativity. Let's just be positive. This is your persona. Company's going to look, if they see negativity, they're going to second guess if they really want to hire you. And that is becoming more prevalent in today's day and age. What's this person doing on social media? Are they a loose cannon? Are they unpredictable? So avoid negativity. Treat your repos like a portfolio. Upload your stuff to Git, even if you're a student. Once again, what you're saying is, look at my code, but below that is, I've got some experience with Git, which is huge in today's day and age. Not everybody knows it, especially in the RPG world. It's not really a common thing. So once again, not only are you demonstrating your code, you're also saying, I'm beginning to work with modern technologies. You're telling them something, you're telling them multiple things at once with that. So finally, how side projects strengthen your position. So it was really tough for me to look for code in my time, in my 8 months when I did not have a job. And I was just applying, and for anything tech related. And I think I probably would have done better to have sharpened my skills in the RPG IBM realm instead of putting out, I think, hundreds of applications over 8 months. So why do you want to do that? If you're a newcomer and you haven't programmed an RPG for 8 months, and then you're trying to talk about RPG coding in your interview, it's just going to shake your confidence. If you were programming in something RPG, an hour before the interview started and it's something you've been working on, you have something in recent memory that you can talk about related to the job. It's not going to feel so uh, it's not going to feel so out of your wheelhouse, and so it keeps your skills sharp. If you can come into your job hot, if you can come into your job feeling confident and feeling like you're going to be able to do it, that's going to help you a lot. You do not want to enter a job where you feel over your head, where you feel like you're not growing and you don't know what questions to ask. Get yourself oriented. You want to come in hot. That's my suggestion. So that's why one reason why side projects matter. Builds confidence. Yes, like I said, if you are just working on something and have been working on something for the past 8 months that's RPG related, you're going to feel a lot better talking openly to the people interviewing you than if they say, what's your experience with RPG? And you say, well, I haven't done it in 8 months, and I could be a little bit better versed in it, and it doesn't kind of read and write data. You want to sound like you're oriented to the task. You want to feel confident and to talk about something that you're building, and hopefully you think that what you're building is cool. It's going to show that you have a passion for it. If you're doing this stuff in your free time, that means that you're a self-starter, that you're somebody who will do something through their own determination as opposed to being forced to do it. And so they won't have to, when they see that you're doing this, they're going to realize that they're not going to have to push you through learning every step of the way and basically, have to be completely responsible for you learning what you need to learn. If you're a self-starter, if you can learn what you need to learn to get the job done without being pushed or prompted or told, that's a good thing. Nobody wants to have somebody who's not going to do something unless they've been pushed and told to do it. A company would much rather have somebody who's going to be a self-starter and identify what they need to know and learn it as part of their own initiative as opposed to being forced to. And finally, shows genuine interest in the platform, So I started integrating PHP with the IBM I, and I wanted to learn the web side of things. And so I started doing things that way. And maybe my next role won't call for working on the web, but that's okay. I'm in I'm in the proximal range. I'm within striking distance of the IBM I because I'm interfacing the web with the IBM I. Basically, I care about the platform. I'm interested in the platform. I want to learn more about the platform. I'm in love with the platform. That's the message you want to send. And if you know anything about the IBM I, you will be in love with the platform, trust me. So, little story about my own side project. Once again, integrating PHP and RPG. What I found out, how can we use PHP to invoke an RPG program? How do we use our existing RPG logic and have PHP interface with it? Stored procedures is the middle person between RPG and the web. PHP can invoke SQL. SQL can invoke RPG stored procedures. That can get passed all the way back to the client side through PHP. And that was a really cool thing to learn because I didn't even know that RPG could be exposed to the web in that way. So that was a really great thing to learn. We got PHP APIs that are returning JSON, and that JSON is coming from fields that are in a DB2 table on the IBM I. You can do the web on the IBM I, and it's actually a really great platform to do it. But really, really stunning to find out that we can write APIs that are retrieving information from the IBM I and then returning it back to be displayed on a web page. And finally, standing up a model view control PHP to RPG application in minutes. And you might say, well, how do you know that's possible? Well, a little bit of self promotion here. I wrote it. So right now, you can download the repo, you can go through the steps, and probably I would say it would take you about 10 minutes to get a deposit withdrawal full stack model view control PHP to RPG application going that takes the form of a banking application in 10 minutes or less. There's a video out there to do it. It's not that hard. You just got PHP scripts. It's interacting with SQL stored procedures. It's invoking a single RPG program that's handling all the deposit and withdrawal logic, and then it's sending, the balance of the account back up after everything has been processed. Get it going in 10 minutes. You can explore. It's got JSON Web Token for authentication. It's got encrypted passwords. That's all being stored in a DB2 database. Totally modern, no problem, 10 minutes or less. Check it out. So here are the practical action steps that you can take to hopefully take your career to the next level. You can volunteer for those user groups or conferences like we talked about. If you can't make it into a conference for one reason or other, user groups, the barrier to entry is a lot lower. Typically, you have dues that you pay every year, but you get a lot of good content and to get to meet a lot of good people as a result of attending that user group. Find yourself a mentor. There's ways to do it. Like I said, Common is a great way. If not, make connections through the user group or the conference. If you don't find one there, ask somebody there who you should talk to. They're going to be able to point you in the right direction. And this goes back to how side projects help. Start a small side project. Make it as big or as small as you want. For me, I like working with the data. So I said, why don't I take some time to learn ERP systems and build just a slice of the order entry side of an ERP system. And that's been a great learning experience. There's no application yet for it. I'm just designing tables, but that's what I like to do. I want to get better with data, and I want experience with data, and working with data, building and creating tables. That's where I have the most fun. Figure out what works for you and just make sure you're having fun and upload that stuff to Git so you can show it off. Finally, stay curious and engaged. Can't say it enough. This is going to help you across all sides of this whole thing. Whether you're at a conference, a user group, with your mentor, or at your job, staying curious and engaged is always going to help you. So with that, I'd like to say thank you all very much for attending my session today. Are there any questions? Well, thank you. And let me just end on this. IBMI isn't just a platform. It's a career accelerator, but only for people who decide to own it. The opportunity is already there. The only variable left is you. Raise your hand if you're going to get the most out of this opportunity. Thank you very much for your time.